a panel discussion on the civic role in that question, and finally a political response to those issues. So many of the topics that are in this major education debate, this is a debate we talk about almost every day in the media in Northern Ireland: economics, education, the churches, families, parents, the civic society role, and the political questions. We'll try to cover them all in the next 3 hours. Are you ready for that? And if you're on Twitter, you can join the debate there. You can follow me at William Crawley, all one word, on Twitter. You can follow Lisa. Lisa, spell your last name.
Lisa? M-C-E-L-H-E-R-R-O-N.
McElherron. Did you get that? Lisa McElherron, put your hand up if you're now on Twitter. Good. Oh, that's pretty good. So let's get the word out on Twitter. Some of our politicians are on Twitter most of the day. Colin McDevitt, of course, has been tweeting as he goes to the bathroom across Belfast. We know exactly where he is at any moment of the day. So he'll be tweeting your comments as we go throughout the proceedings. So to begin it all, let's have our first briefing. And at the end of these two briefings, I'm going to ask you to form little buzz groups, exactly where you are. That's small group work. You have the lecture, then you get the small group work. And in the small group work, we're going to ask your responses to what you're just about to hear on our two briefings. The first is an economic briefing, and then we'll have an educational briefing. The economic briefing comes from Philip McDONAGH. Philip is the former chief economist of PricewaterhouseCoopers. He's got 30 years' experience working in economic issues in Northern Ireland. He's also a member of the Charity Commission, and he comes to us today as our special consultant on economics today for NICVA. Please welcome Philip McDONAGH.
I may have 30 years' experience in economy, but I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in education, except for the fact that my wife is a primary school teacher, a P4 teacher, and so I hear about a teacher's view of the classroom every evening after work. And economics is we've often talked about this. Economics is the study of scarce resources, and I'm aware that resources in the classroom have a different meaning, perhaps, to what we usually think of it in economists. It's more about pencils and books and equipment and things like that. And when I talked to my wife about this, about economics, and she asked me what an economist is, as she often does, and some of you will know my wife, and she doesn't put her pencil. She says, well, I wish you'd stop pontificating and make yourself useful and tell me how I can solve the problem of scarce resources in my classroom. Today I'm going to try and not pontificate and make myself useful to the debate. So, turning to the economic view of shared education. And what I'd like to talk about first of all, why does the economy matter to a debate like this? And I suspect 5 years ago it probably wouldn't have, to be honest. But because the economy has suddenly become interesting to everybody, it affects not just our jobs, but our daily lives, and also the public spending context. It's important to all of us. The economy obviously creates jobs for school leavers and for graduates, the young people, and we aren't creating enough jobs at the moment to satisfy or to meet the demand for jobs that's coming out from our schools and colleges. And the economy, particularly at the present time, as Seamus has said, in the knowledge economy, we really do need well-educated and well-trained young people, because that's where the future of the economy lies. And thirdly, and most importantly, the economy is important at the moment because of the public expenditure situation, and the fact that the economy, the education, like all other parts of the public expenditure cake, is competing for very scarce resources. And I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. But where are we with the Northern Ireland economy? Well, I'll try not to be too gloomy here. It'll be easy to wallow in a bit of doom and gloom, as economists are wont to do. But things are rough, as you will know. This recession has been going on since about 2008 now, almost 3 years, and we're still struggling to get out of it. We expect about 1% growth this year, and maybe if we're lucky, 2% growth next year. And the problem with that is that it's not enough to create, as I say, to create the jobs that we need. We've maybe avoided the double dip, but it's going to be a long, hard slog for the next few years in terms of economic growth. Unemployment is up. It's almost doubled now at around 60,000, and the number of jobs has come down to below 700,000. The property market, as anyone who owns a home or has been buying or hoping to buy a home will know, the property market bubble has collapsed. House prices have fallen by around 40% over the last 3 to 4 years, and there's very little prospect of them coming back in the near future, rising again in the near future. Indeed, people are talking about will they even actually go further down than they are at the present. Just to lift the gloom a little bit there, I mean, while property prices have gone down, mortgage rates are also very low, and interest rates. So there is a bright side to the property market. Inflation, again, as we all know, has risen and is hitting both households and businesses as the costs of businesses are being affected by high inflation. Some of that may ease off, but it is affecting all our lives. And one of the features of the Northern Ireland economy is that in past recessions we've had this, what they call the public sector cushion. So it gives us a kind of a soft landing when the private sector goes through a recessionary period. We always have the public sector there as a cushion to ease the fall, although sometimes it also has restricted the growth of coming out of the recession. But in fact, the public sector, as we all know, has flattened out, and the landing hasn't been quite as soft this time. So we are in a difficult situation. It's going to be a long, hard slog to get out of it. And more than that, we aren't in great shape to come out of it. We have what's being called now by, well, everybody in coalition government as well as the executive, we have an imbalance in the economy, which is represented by a very large public sector and a very small private sector. About 1/3 of all our jobs are in the public sector. About another third are dependent in one way on the public sector. When I worked in PricewaterhouseCoopers, a lot of our business was with the public sector, so we depended on the public sector for a proportion of our jobs. The subvention, which is the difference between what we pay in taxes and what we receive in public spending, is now approaching £11 billion per annum. That's £6,500 per man, woman and child who are being supported by the British Exchequer. That's a huge amount. Now, there are some valid reasons for that. It's partly distributing resources from the very wealthy southeast of England to the regions. Other regions benefit from subvention as well. We also have larger, particularly in relation to education, we have larger families than other parts of the UK, so we have a bigger education bill. And in fact, we're in some ways educating children for to go and work in the rest of the UK. The other side of the coin is we have a very small private sector, and some people say that it's not that we have a large public sector, it's that we have a very small private sector with a large number of very small firms. Manufacturing has now fallen in Northern Ireland to less than 14% of GDP, which is probably at the bottom end of the range of international countries in terms of proportions of GDP. Productivity seems to be stuck basically since the 1950s at 80% of the UK average. So we need to rebalance the economy. We need to bring it back into balance, and that's a major challenge. And just to give you an idea of how dependent we are on the public sector, this figure shows the net government deficit, the difference between the government deficit as a proportion of GDP. And you'll see that most of at the present time, most global countries are in deficit. Even China, down at the very bottom, is 0.3% in deficit as a proportion of GDP. It then goes up through India, Germany, The UK at roughly 12% of GDP. The Republic of Ireland, I've shown it there with and without the IMF loans. Without the IMF loans, it's something like 30%. The deficit, of government spending deficit as a percentage of GDP. When you bring in the IMF loans, it comes down to 14%. But Northern Ireland, if we were a country, our deficit, in other words our subvention, the difference between our what we pay in taxes and what we receive in public spending, would be something like over 40% of our GDP. So that gives you an idea of the scale of dependence. Fortunately, we're not a country or a nation just yet. So, with this growing debt, the UK took the big decision that they needed to do something about it. This had implications for Northern Ireland. Last October, the Chancellor made his announcement about the cuts that were going to take place, and we had this kind of phony war, the 4 billion cuts, which our Deputy First and Deputy First Minister said were swingeing and worse than we were led to believe, and where our very cheerful Secretary of State said were a very good settlement. So you can take your pick about what they actually were. There's probably a bit of truth on both sides. They were sharp cuts, but at the same time they could have been a lot worse. And what is the result of that is that public spending is going to fall over the current period by something like 1.4% per annum. This chart shows you the growth in public spending over the last 10 years for each of the spending review. SR stands for spending review period. It's a period of 3 to 4 years over which the government plans. And you can see in 1998, for the following 3-year period, we had a 4% growth in public spending. It went up to 5% at the start of the current millennium, then fell back a bit in the most recent period that ended in March this year. We had roughly a rate of growth per annum of 2%, and that's in real terms in public spending in Northern Ireland. But we're actually going to have to shift it in the opposite direction over the next period, a decline of 1.4% per annum. That's just to give you an idea of the scale of the change that we're facing in the public sector. And coming then down to education, what does this mean for the education sector? This graph is taken from the Department of Education's draft budget document produced in January this year. And it shows you the blue line at the top is what the department called, starting from 2010-11, and including this lovely phrase, inescapable pressures. In other words, things that they were committed to spending on. So under that scenario, the department reckoned that spending would grow from 1.9 billion up to over 2.1 billion, just to meet these inescapable pressures. The draft budget that the department got allocated is the green line at the bottom, and actually a slight decline. So you can see the scale of the gap between what the department wanted to do and felt were the requirements on them to deliver the education system that they needed, and the money available. And by 2014-15, you'll see that there's a gap there of roughly £300 million between the resources available and the commitments that the department felt were necessary. So there were a number of savings proposed in the budget statement. But the big element of that budget of the 1.9 billion at the moment, 1.1 billion of that is the schools budget. So really you have to find the savings there, and that's the only way to address the issue. So how can sharing education contribute to addressing that budget gap? This shows just a table of the schools' surplus provision, what we might call surplus provision in schools. Now, before I talk about this table, I'd just like to say something about the Deloitte's study on the costs of division, which was undertaken a few years ago. where they attempted to estimate the costs of the division in our community between the two, or between the various types of schools. They were able to identify about 10 million in administration costs of division, but really it was impossible to estimate because the system was so integrated that it was impossible to estimate the actual costs of the division between the schools. They estimated that if it was a 5% saving, that it might cost, that it might be up to 80 million. So there's a potential cost of division of at least 80 million in the system there somewhere. But it's easy to see from the statistics, and particularly this shows for comparing with England, Scotland and Wales, the number of schools per 1,000 pupils in the primary sector and the secondary sector. And you'll see, while the primary sector seems to be fairly close to the average, in fact below the average for Scotland and Wales, that in the secondary sector we have a figure of 1.48 schools per 1,000 pupils compared with just over 1 in England and 1.24 in Scotland, the second last column there. So there appears to be a potential surplus. These figures are, incidentally, drawn from the Oxford Economics report on the scoping study on sharing education. So, from an economic point of view, what are the benefits of a shared approach to education? Again, I'm drawing on very much on the Oxford Economics report here, but it does offer an opportunity from an economic point of view to address directly this fiscal crunch, this budget gap that you've seen there in the department's budget. To actually, and rather than having death by 1,000 cuts by salami slicing bits of the system here, there and everywhere, that you can actually take an innovative approach and adopt a serious shared approach to the problem. It's a form of area-based planning and practice. It reduces unhealthy competition and eliminates unhealthy competitive practices between schools in a similar locality. It addresses inefficiencies and excess capacity in the current system. I know one town, just taking my own subject, economics, I know one town in Northern Ireland, which I shan't name, where I think there are 6 economics teachers, medium-sized town, 6 economics teachers, all teaching small classes of economics and business studies, and where, at least I know in that one subject, there is potential for making better use of the resources we have. It's also an opportunity to reorientate provision towards tomorrow's demand, towards the knowledge economy, to focus it, and to make sure that we optimise the quality of teaching, that we make the best use of the best teachers that we have. Finally, it's an integrated form of shared education. It delivers on the shared future agenda. But there are risks and downsides. We need to be aware of the difficulties. It's always difficult to actually deliver savings on the ground. It may take some time to deliver the savings, and the department has been given some extra resources in the final budget to allow them to address some of these issues. But savings do take time and need to be generated. It may take some capital investment in the short term. But also, if you increase sharing, it reduces your flexibility, or reduce the number of schools. It reduces your flexibility of demand. And we know that there's a growth in the number of young children in the population coming through. There's actually going to be a growth in demand for primary school provision over the next 5 years, just when we're trying to make some savings. So that's going to be a major challenge. Some level of local competition between schools is healthy. Competition is a good thing in economics terms. But is it what people want for their children? This is the real challenge. And can we achieve it without limiting parental choice? And finally, just in conclusion, investment in education is critical for economic progress. I don't need to tell you that, but it's and we need to make optimal use of the scarce public spending resources that we have. One way of releasing those resources is through a shared approach to education. So the big question is, are we willing to grasp the nettle, be innovative with our approach to this, to sharing of education, and indeed, do we have a choice? I believe it's a fantastic opportunity that we need to grasp and that has enormous benefits for us. Thank you very much.